It was the kind of morning where the rain didn't just fall, it drilled. A steady, punishing downpour that soaked you through no matter how quick your dash from car to front door. And yet, when I stepped into the apartment on West 19th Street, two things hit me right away. The smell of old blood and the dry coat hanging neatly on the rack. The victim was Gerald Rooker, 72, retired Navy vet, lived alone, no kids. Neighbors describe him as quiet but polite. That kind of profile that never makes headlines until it's too late. His landlord had found him sprawled on the floor by the hallway mirror after hearing his dog, an aging golden retriever, barking nonstop for hours. No signs of forced entry. No broken windows. Front door locked. Back door locked. Windows shut tight. And then there was the coat. A thick, wool-lined overcoat. Beige. And completely dry. That shouldn't have been possible. Not with the storm outside. Not unless someone had been inside for a long while, or never left. I stood there, staring at it. The coat had no water stains, no smell of wet fabric. There wasn't even a single drop on the floor beneath it. Everything else in the hallway carried signs of a storm. Wet umbrella by the wall, a muddy paw print from the dog, but not the coat. That's when my instincts kicked in. Gerald was found in what looked like a fall. Head split open on the corner of a wooden shoe cabinet. At first glance, it looked like a tragic accident. But when you've seen enough bodies like I have, something about the angle of the wound, the blood pattern, and the position of his arms made you pause. This wasn't a stumble. It was a push. A precise one. I checked the place from top to bottom. His kitchen counters were clean, almost too clean. The coffee machine was still warm. 2 cups in the sink, both rinsed. His phone was locked, but on the counter, screen dark, notification silent. No signs of struggle, no valuables missing. His wallet was still in his back pocket. TV remote still facing the couch. But then I found the drawer, top left of his desk. Inside was a notepad, and on it, barely legible under the indent of the last torn-out page, I could make out the words. He's coming over again. Says he wants to make things right. Can I trust him? Now we had a thread to pull. Rooker's bank record showed a recent deposit. 10 grand in cash. No job, no pension adjustment, no explanation. Just cash. Old bills, non-sequential. My gut told me someone was paying him off, or silencing him. Then came the neighbor's testimony. I saw someone leaving around 9 a.m. Tall guy, leather gloves, black ball cap. Didn't say anything. Just nodded. Thought it was his nephew or something. Rooker didn't have a nephew. Security cameras? Of course. The building had none working. But across the street, a gas station had one camera that pointed at just the right angle. We got a glimpse of the man. Tall, stocky, hoodie pulled tight. He exited the building with an umbrella. But here's the detail that stuck. He was carrying his coat, folded over one arm, and it was soaked. It didn't match the dry one inside. So now the question became, whose coat was that? Fingerprints came up clean. But under the collar, tucked into a small stitch pocket, we found a business card. Slightly damp, edges curling. It belonged to a former business associate of Rooker's, Miles Hensley, former Navy intelligence, discharged for misconduct, vanished off the grid 5 years earlier. When we found him, he was living under an alias in Pennsylvania, working as a security consultant. We brought him in, and it didn't take long before the pressure cracked him. Rooker had been blackmailing him, threatening to expose some of their classified dealings from decades ago. Miles had paid him off, twice. But the old man wouldn't stop. Said he had more documents. Was going to journalist. Miles came over that morning to negotiate. But when Rooker threatened to call the press, things escalated. He claimed it was an accident. Claimed he just shoved him a little too hard. After Rooker collapsed, Miles panicked. Wiped the coffee cups. Rinsed the sink. Cleared the counters. He went to leave. But here's where it gets twisted. His own coat was soaked, and he didn't want to drive drenched. So he grabbed one of Gerald's coats, one that had never been worn, fresh from the closet. He put it on, but the sleeves were too short. Instead of wearing it, he left it on a hook and bolted with his own wet one over his arm. The detail he never considered? Why would a coat on the hook, right next to the wet umbrella, be bone dry? That contradiction broke the whole timeline apart. Sometimes in a crime scene, it's not the things that scream for attention. It's the ones that whisper. The coat was whispering from the beginning, and once I listened, the rest unfolded like it always does. Because in this job, the smallest wrong detail is usually the loudest truth. I've always said that crime isn't loud, not the clever ones. Anyway, it's quiet. It's a misplaced sock, the dish in the sink that wasn't supposed to be there, or, like in this case, the bookmark that was moved. It was a Wednesday when I got the call. Amanda Keller, 62, found dead in her apartment in Charleston, South Carolina. No signs of forced entry. No signs of struggle. She was found slumped in her reading chair, mug of chamomile tea resting undisturbed on the side table. Her sister, Melissa, who called it in, swore it had to be natural causes. But to me flagged something. Atropine, a plant-based poison. Subtle, almost poetic. Almost. I arrived at the scene later that morning. The apartment was neat, painfully so. Books alphabetized, plants all trimmed, picture frames aligned as if by a ruler. Amanda was a retired librarian, organized to the bone. But that was exactly the problem. Everything was too perfect. And then I noticed a book on the armrest. A farewell to arms, spine bent, pages slightly yellowed. A red leather bookmark sat between pages 132 and 133. Here's the thing. Melissa told the first responders that Amanda reread Hemingway every year and always noted her favorite chapter, Chapter 21, which starts on page 148. Amanda had a habit, Melissa said, of placing the bookmark on that page days before beginning the book. Ritual, precision, consistency. And Amanda, she didn't forget things like that. So why was the bookmark on page 132? At first glance, it seemed trivial. But this wasn't just about a reading habit. It was about who knew that habit. Because if someone placed a bookmark there, and it wasn't Amanda, it meant they knew her deeply, personally, intimately, which meant this wasn't just about murder. It was about betrayal. The toxicology report confirmed it. Lethal dose of atropine, likely administered orally. The tea mug had no traces of it. The kettle and tea bag, clean. So I went back to the books. Literally, Amanda had dozens. I noticed something odd on the second shelf. The bell jar by Sylvia Plath was upside down. Not just misaligned, fully inverted, out of character for Amanda. I pulled it out. It felt heavier than it should. Inside was a small vial. Empty. I didn't say a word. Just held it up and watched Melissa's face. She blinked, froze, then said, "That wasn't there before, but it was in Amanda's house, and it was Amanda's book." I asked how often Melissa visited. She hesitated. "Almost every day. I help her with errands." I turned back to the bookmark. The leather was newer than the others in the house. It didn't match Amanda's older, worn style. There was a faint perfume on it. Musky, not the floral lavender scent Amanda used. I asked for a list of recent visitors. Just one stood out. Richard Gorman, Amanda's neighbor from 2 doors down. Widower, retired professor. And according to Melissa, he and Amanda had been reading together once a week for the past year. Richard's alibi was that he hadn't seen Amanda in 2 days. But when I asked him what book they were reading, he said A Farewell to Arms. Just getting to chapter 21. That detail froze me. He knew where the bookmark should have been. So either he was lying or someone framed him by putting it back in the wrong spot. But Amanda's journal helped. She wrote everything. Every tea she drank. Every page she read. Every argument she had. In her entry 2 days before her death, she wrote, "Melissa dropped off groceries today. Seemed upset. Said Richard wasn't good for me. Jealous. That's when the motive snapped into place. Melissa didn't like Amanda pulling away or having someone else become her confidant. And she had access to the tea, to the house, to Amanda. She likely meant to frame Richard by misplacing the bookmark, just enough to tie the book to him, knowing their reading routine. But she underestimated the precision of Amanda's habits. Amanda may have been dying, but she'd never misplaced a damn bookmark. Melissa was arrested 3 days later. She confessed during interrogation. Said she never meant for it to go that far. Said she just wanted Amanda to herself again. But poison doesn't listen to intention. You want to know what solved that case? Not the lab reports. Not the surveillance footage. Not even the confession. It was a bookmark. Just a slice of leather and page numbers. But in a world where the smallest deviations are signs of hidden truths, it spoke louder than any scream. Sometimes the most silent detail screams the loudest. It was supposed to be just a break. I'd wrapped up a scene in the woods, a pretty standard suicide that smelled off but proved clean, and stopped by a diner on Route 41. I'd been there once before, months back. Place was called Millie's. Small, rustic, laminated menus, waitress with a smoker's rasp, and the kind of coffee that usually took forever to show up unless you begged for it. But that day it came out fast. Too fast. I had barely touched the cracked vinyl of the booth seat when a coffee cup landed in front of me. Black. No cream, no sugar. Just how I take it. And that's what made me freeze. I hadn't ordered yet. The waitress, not the one I remembered, a younger girl, maybe early 20s, gave me a tight smile and walked off without a word. No notepad, no check-in, just a mug of steaming coffee placed with too much familiarity. I sat there, watching the steam spiral. It was still early morning, quiet. There were 3 other people in the diner. A trucker half asleep over eggs, a man in a suit on his phone, and an older woman reading a newspaper. I didn't touch the coffee. Not out of paranoia. At least not yet, but because something was wrong and I've learned to listen to that voice. I watched it for a good 5 minutes, like it might confess something. I thought maybe the waitress just saw me coming and remembered. Could be. But the last time I was at Millie's, it was late at night and I sat at the counter, and the coffee came cold. That's when I stood up and approached the counter. She saw me coming, gave me the same smile. Tight, too polite, too clean. "Everything all right, sir?" she asked. "Yeah." I said, "Just wondering if you always bring coffee before the order." She blinked. "You ordered when you walked in. You said, 'Black, no sugar.'" I hadn't. I know I hadn't. I looked over the register, the cork board, the handwritten notes. Everything in its place, except one small thing, a missing flyer. The last time I was there, I remembered seeing one, some girl missing from a nearby town. Her face had stuck with me, not because she was beautiful or tragic, but because of the eyes. There was no flyer now. I asked, "Wasn't there a missing persons poster up here?" The waitress shrugged. People go missing all the time. Something in the way she said it made my stomach turn. Not sarcastic, not dismissive, just flat, like it was a script. I sat back down at my booth and didn't touch the coffee. I watched the people again. The trucker, the man in the suit, the old woman. It was too quiet. Then the door opened. A guy walked in. Late 30s military build, clean cut. He looked around like he was expecting someone, or scanning. His eyes passed over me, then landed on the waitress. She gave him a nod. He sat down 2 booths behind me. A minute later, the same waitress brought him coffee. Black, no sugar. Again, no order taken. I waited, watched him. He didn't even blink before sipping it. No reaction, no acknowledgement, like it was routine. That's when I got up and went to the bathroom. Not because I needed to, but to get a look behind the counter on my way. As I passed, I caught a glimpse of the ticket spike. You know, where they put the order slips. It was empty. No orders had been written down that morning. Inside the bathroom, I locked the door and called a friend at the local sheriff's department. A woman named Harper, who owed me more favors than she'd like to admit. I asked if she had any open missing persons in the area with ties to Route 41. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, "How the hell do you know about Olivia Grant?" "Who?" 17. Vanished 3 weeks ago. Last seen, hang on. I waited. Then she said it. Last seen at Millie's Diner. I opened the bathroom door and stepped out. The man in the suit was gone. The trucker was still there, but his eyes were on me now. And the waitress? She was no longer behind the counter. I walked out, didn't pay, didn't finish the coffee, didn't ask permission. I got in my car and drove 2 blocks, parked, and walked back through the alley to the back of the diner. There was a door, unmarked, padlocked, and next to it, a camera, one of those cheap ones that uploads directly to the cloud. You don't put a camera in the back of a diner unless you're hiding something back there. The padlock wasn't new, but it was clean. Too clean for the rust that covered the hinges. I called Harper back and gave her the address. "Bring backup," I said, "and tell them not to drink the coffee." What we found an hour later behind that door is part of an open case I still can't talk about fully. But I'll say this. There were recordings from inside that diner. Audio, some video. Some of it as old as 4 years. People went in. Some never came out. Others changed their stories after being there. And the coffee? It wasn't drugged, but it was part of it. A psychological pattern. A trigger. The waitress had training, not food service training. The kind you don't get from a culinary school. To this day, I don't know how they knew how I take my coffee. But I know one thing. Sometimes, the fastest service is the most dangerous. Because when everything moves just a little too smoothly, that's when you're already inside someone else's plan. Some people think the devil's in the details. I think the devil hides in the silence between them. The case came in like any other. Small town, missing person, digital trail colder than the victim's empty apartment. Her name was Danielle Hart, 34, pediatric nurse. Lived alone in a small duplex in Eugene, Oregon. Never missed a shift, never ignored a message, and never left her cat without food for more than a few hours. But she'd been gone 3 days before anyone called it in. What brought me in wasn't the missing person. It was the last message she ever sent. According to her friend Megan, Danielle had texted her around 10:18 p.m. on a Thursday. A simple line, "He's here." That was it. No name, no explanation, just those 2 words. The message showed as delivered, but never read. Normally, I wouldn't think twice. Phones crash. Notifications get missed. But Megan swore something was off. She'd been texting back within seconds, even called twice. The first rang. The second went straight to voicemail. By 10:24, the phone was offline. Gone dark. I met with the lead detective and asked to see the device. Danielle's phone had been found on her kitchen counter when the landlord opened up for a wellness check. It wasn't damaged, but the SIM was removed. The phone had no passcode, odd for a woman working in hospitals and living alone. And when I pulled the logs, that 10:18 message was there. But something wasn't right. It wasn't the main thread with Megan. It was isolated, sent as a new thread, which meant whoever typed it didn't scroll up to continue a conversation. Just searched the contact and fired it off. I looked at the metadata. GPS showed the message was sent from inside the house. But timestamps are easy to manipulate if you know what you're doing. What wasn't easy to manipulate, though, was the fact that the message hadn't generated a read receipt, not because Megan didn't open it, but because, according to the phone, it had been sent from a secondary app, one that mimics native SMS interfaces, usually for cheating spouses or burner IDs. The app had been wiped, but you can never truly erase usage traces. I found a fragment deep in the system logs that matched a discontinued texting service, one often used by private contractors and former military. That alone wouldn't be enough. But then I found the Real break. The sender's keyboard language was set to ENGB. Danielle, born and raised in Oregon, used ENUS across everything else. And trust me, people don't switch their language settings casually. Whoever sent that message wasn't Danielle. But that raised a new question. If she didn't send it, where was she at 10:18? I checked her apartment again. Still clean. No forced entry. Fridge was half-stocked. Cat food dish untouched. But then, under the sofa cushion, I found an old receipt for a security camera install. I asked the landlord. He didn't know about it. I traced the company. Turns out Danielle had installed a hidden camera herself, disguised as a motion sensor. When I finally got the footage, it was short, just under 3 minutes. Timestamped 10:16 to 10:19. Danielle appears in frame, pacing, phone in hand. She stops, looks toward the door. You can't hear anything, no audio. But she looks startled, then scared. At 10:17, the front door opens. A man enters. Danielle backs up, says something. He doesn't rush her. He just talks, calm, like he's trying to reason with her. She looks down, probably at her phone. Then, this part haunts me. She hands it to him. He types something, presses send, then pulls out the SIM and slides it into his coat pocket. Danielle disappears from the frame. He leaves, calm, controlled. I froze the frame and ran it through facial recognition. Took hours, but it hit Paul Larkin, former Army intelligence, now private security consultant, specialized in discreet extractions. Translation, high-paid fixer. I knew the type. Worked just within the gray lines of legality. Hired by powerful people to clean up problems before they reached courtrooms. I got a warrant. Larkin's residence was pristine. No sign of Danielle. But his digital footprint told another story. 2 weeks prior, he'd been paid a lump sum by a shell company linked to Danielle's ex-fiancé, Andrew Kellner, tech entrepreneur, worth 8 figures. They'd split after a domestic dispute that was never officially reported. I had the connection, but no proof Danielle was alive or dead. Then I remembered something. When Megan tried calling Danielle at 10:18, the first call had rung, which meant the phone was active. With GPS metadata, I backtracked it. There was a 22-second window when the phone had pinged a different tower, one that didn't cover her neighborhood. That tower was closest to a private airstrip outside Corvallis. I checked the logs. At 10:42 p.m., a single-engine jet had taken off, registered to another LLC, tied to the same holding firm that paid Larkin. Destination, Guatemala. No passport stamp for Danielle ever appeared. But I knew what that meant. Someone had bypassed customs. Private contractors like Larkin didn't deal in deaths. They specialized in disappearances. I gave the evidence to the Bureau. My job was done. But that message never left my mind. He's here, sent from a fake app, by a man who didn't want her to vanish quietly, but to make sure anyone had a sliver of a clue. That text didn't fail to show a read receipt by accident. It was a breadcrumb, and I still don't know if it was a goodbye or a silent cry for help. Some crime scenes speak loud, others whisper, but the one that waited for me that morning in Beacon Hill didn't speak at all. It was too perfect. So perfect, it was wrong. The call came in at 6:47 a.m. A 31-year-old woman named Allison Mercer, found dead in her apartment by her neighbor, who claimed she hadn't seen her in 3 days. The door was unlocked. No sign of forced entry. No noise. No struggle. Just a body on the carpet of a modern loft that looked like it had just been cleaned for a realtor's photo shoot. I arrived minutes after the first officers. It was a top-floor unit. Exposed brick, polished concrete floors. The kind of place that told you its owner liked minimalism, but had the money to fake it convincingly. Allison was lying on her side by the coffee table. No blood. No bruises. No broken glass. No scattered furniture. A glass of water still on the end table beside her. Condensation intact. She looked asleep. The neighbor, a woman named Janet Frazier, was shaking when I spoke to her. She always texted me before work, every morning, even if it was just a thumbs up. But for the last 2 days, nothing. I knocked last night. No answer. This morning the door was ajar. I thought maybe she had left early, but then she didn't need to finish. The ME's initial estimate said time of death was roughly 36 hours earlier. No signs of overdose, trauma, or asphyxiation. Toxicology would take time. I circled the room. Every book on the shelf aligned. Remote control centered on the armrest. One solitary plate in the sink, spotless. Even the trash can have been emptied. That's when it hit me. The room didn't feel lived in. It felt staged. And Allison? She didn't fit the scene either. Her posture wasn't natural. Too symmetrical. Hands delicately folded. hair combed behind the ears, and the makeup flawless, the kind no one wears at home alone. I asked myself, who gets dressed up in their own apartment just to die quietly on the floor? The neighbor told me Allison had worked remotely for a fintech startup. Single, kept to herself, quiet. You know the type, she said. But I didn't. Allison's phone was missing, her laptop, too, but there was no sign of theft. Her wallet was still there, untouched. A full bottle of prescription antidepressants was neatly placed beside her bed, unopened, dated 3 months back, unfilled. That night, I requested security footage from the building's only camera, pointed at the lobby. It showed Allison entering 2 days earlier at 6:04 p.m., wearing jeans and a hoodie. She never came out. No visitors. No deliveries. The doorman swore he hadn't seen anyone, but something kept gnawing at me. I returned to the apartment the next morning. The police had cleared out. The place was cold, quiet. I walked through slowly, listening, looking. That's when I found it. Behind the couch, tucked neatly between the cushions, Allison's earring. Just one, a tiny pearl stud. It didn't match the one she wore in the footage. I checked the photo on her driver's license. Different earrings again. I turned to the closet. Her jewelry box was missing, so it was a theft, but not a value of identity. And then I saw the calendar on the fridge. A single event circled in red. Dinner with Drew, 7 p.m. No last name, no address, no phone number. But Drew left a trail, buried in her email drafts, recovered later by cybercrime, was a message she never sent. A breakup message. Angry. Final. I'm not covering for you again. It read, next time you vanish, it won't be me taking the fall. Turns out Drew Fisher was real. A 38-year-old ex-financial advisor, twice divorced, with a sealed charge for identity fraud and a history of vanishing just before subpoenas arrived. They met in a support group. She thought she could fix him. He thought she was disposable. I had forensics re-examine the scene. That spotless glass of water, it had no prints. Not hers. Not anyone's. No lip marks either. But the underside of the glass table, that had a smudge. A partial. Just enough to match Drew's print from an old DUI. Allison had broken up with him. Probably threatened to expose something. So he did what men like him do. Took control. He dressed her, staged the apartment, and vanished. But he made one mistake. One subtle detail no one thought to check. The security footage didn't show him entering because he was already inside. He never left because he never used the door. The fire escape connected directly to her balcony, covered by no camera, no alarm. I found 2 faint scuff marks on a railing, one from his boots, the other grease in the fire escape hinge. Fresh. Allison didn't kill herself. She didn't die of natural causes. She was silenced, and the room around her was cleaned to make her seem small, insignificant, calm. But a crime like that doesn't fit a room like that, because crimes, real ones, are always messy, and the people who cover them up, they always forget something.